Hi, this is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden. Welcome to Zen BDSM. I love those words merged together. So, I'm going to talk about shadow self and what exactly that is, and how this all ties into BDSM, why we do BDSM, and what exactly is Zen BDSM. So, I'm going to start with what is Zen BDSM. One moment. I gotta calibrate myself. Okay. I am a mistress. I have been a mistress all of my life. A mistress is not the same thing as a dom. There is dom, and then there's mistress master. A dom is somebody who usually starts off as a sub or a switch, and they have to find themselves, and then they graduate to a dom. But a mistress or a master has been doing it their whole lives. There's no training involved. It's instinct for them. It really is instinct for them. I was 8 and I was rigging my siblings. And then I was 12. And when my parents refused to buy me my own flogger, I wet my hair and I used my hair. And then on my friends, with their consent, and I was very happy at the welts I left all over their arms. And then when Batman, Return of Batman, one of the second Batman movie released with Michelle Pfeiffer, I went nuts over Catwoman. Like, I wanted to be her. That was like the first tip off that something was like up. Like, that's when I really felt I was weird or different, is when I had a serious thing for Catwoman and I'm like, oh, I want to be her, the whole thing. And then when I was 15, I started building my own dungeon. And I practiced it like from 15 all the way up. And I'm on FetLife. I've been in the lifestyle. I've done shit. And I heard horror stories. Now, this is all while I was playing around with my psychology and my philosophy. So I was really deep into ethics and the power aspect of it and what my ethics were and how they played out in BDSM. You cannot touch BDSM without exploring ethics. They go hand in hand, which is really the other branch of the shadow self. So, yeah, it was extraordinary. It was absolutely extraordinary. And my very probably 6 months into me actually playing with a partner, I learned a very valuable lesson about being, well, I'm going to be blunt. I learned a very valuable lesson about being stupid with BDSM and being smart with it. I was the mistress in the relationship, and he was very much into impact and domination, as in being dominated. And it got to this one particular day where he asked if we could swap roles, and I said yes. Without doing any research, without knowing any of the psychology, I said yes. What began with me consenting to what I thought was going to be the same thing I do to him on a small scale, that's when I found out that he had a serious hatred for women. He was a misogynist and a sadist. And trigger warning. He ended up chaining me to the bed and torturing me for a long time. What began there ended up turning into a 6-month enslavement where I was in chains. And if I did not allow him to continue to do that, he threatened to kill me. And I had to choose between rape or being killed for 6 months. I was kept in a room. When I tell people I was a slave, I fucking meant it. I wore chains that ended up leaving scars for 2 years on my wrists. When I got out, I tried to commit suicide. I cut my wrists. And then I got into another kind of dominatrix role with somebody else. And that ended up lasting 5 years. That is what we call financial domination that I ended up getting into without consent, again. And it wasn't until much later when I started really digging deep into the psychology of BDSM that I found all the fucking shit that was done to me. So when I say I was a sex slave, I need to clarify. I was sexually tortured through BDSM by 2 faux doms. A faux dom is a term I invented when I realized a trend that was taking place. A faux dom is a person, is an abuser or a narcissist who likes to claim they're a dom when all they really want to do is abuse people. Faux doms are predators and they are scammers. The last time I dealt with a faux dom was in the year 2020, and I was talking to a woman who was around 21 years old. She knew nothing about BDSM. So when she met somebody online through a dating app and they insisted that what they did was BDSM, and then she actually explained what happened, what he did was assault her, abuse her, and then rape her. And then chalked it all up to, oh no, that's BDSM. So as a mistress of, at that time, good God, how old was I? I don't even know how long I've been. I don't even know at this point how long I've been. More than 30 years of dominatrix. When I heard the fucking bullshit that he put her through, I drove to her. I drove to meet her and made sure that she was okay, did the psych work. And that really was a wake-up call for me to take a stance against faux doms and the predators who use BDSM as an excuse to abuse. And that was the first of many fucking stories I heard where people go into it and they're ignorant. Bottom line, there's a lot about it that interests them, and they don't know. Yeah, it's all coming back. It's all flooding back. I can feel it. The passion, I can feel the anger, I can feel the excitement, and it's all coming back. In 2020, I came up with this idea of educating people on proper BDSM, safe BDSM, and dangerous BDSM. And I tried to get into it, as in I created a website. You can look at it. It's called devilsdungeonnyc.com. Devil's Dungeon. And the Devil's Dungeon is my dungeon. I teach classes. And I very quickly found out that I was attracting a lot of really ignorant people who had no idea. I noticed they came in 3 categories. They came in floods of curious and with behavioral disorders. Let's change this to behavioral defenses. They came in as experienced with mental wealth, or they came in with experienced and they had behavioral defenses. And I realized there was a significant deficit in healthy, proper, knowledgeable practices of BDSM. So I dug into the sociology of it. I did the research on it. I found out where it comes from. I dug it all out. And with my 28 years of psychology, it was not hard for me to connect A to B and go, this is awesome. And it really is. So I myself was huge into impact play at first. And I was doing it at a time when, well, it's what I did. And I very quickly realized, once I had started to do my actual mental work, that my reasons for doing it started to change. I noticed that it was a fantastic tool for confidence building, for putting myself in a reenactment scenario so I could use exposure therapy in a controlled environment to rewrite my trauma. And then I started to question whether or not that was actually a proper mental practice, which is when I dove into shadow work. And that is when I realized the severe destruction that shadow work does to the subconscious mind. So I decided to stop my work on BDSM while I focus on my mental health. And then when I went back to it, I noticed that some of it triggered me. So I switched the way I dominate and I went more over to a different road. And in this road, I accessed the path of the nurturing mummy dom, which really hit me hard. I loved that role. I once again dove into the psychology of why I do it. And once I was confirmed that I was okay with the reasons, I started looking for my own subs again, and I put them through a very vigorous screening process. And when I started to do my screening process, that is when I had a massive wake up call. I found more people who were using BDSM to punish themselves, reinforce limiting beliefs, and self mutilate to feel like they could control a trauma situation. And I have a rule: if you work with me in BDSM, we are not here to enable your mental illness. That is my very first rule. If you work with me, we are not here to enable your mental sick. We are here to heal you and to help you. And when I started talking to people and digging deep, that's when I realized I was a really fucking good therapist. That's when I realized I was really fucking good at psychology. And that is when I realized that BDSM needed to change. So I created something called Zen BDSM, which is basically BDSM, which is fantastic when it's done right, fighting against the classic underground cult that is toxic BDSM. So I'm going to get into the history of BDSM here shortly, but I want to talk about the shadow self. This is the why we do it. So in your gorgeous makeup of your inner brain, you have 5 parts. You have your subconscious mind and his sidekick, the fear system. You have identity in all of her beautiful glory, and her sidekick, the defense system. And then you have ego, the conscious awareness, the self. I'm the one looking right at yours. My ego looks at yours. When we have a conversation, it's my ego looking at your ego. When I am talking to you and you are listening, it is my ego doing the talking and your ego is doing the listening. Say hello to our egos. Egos are not what, they are whose. Egos are not pride. They are not arrogance. They are not emotions. Egos are not emotions. Egos are whose. And this is mine. And that one's yours. That is your conscious awareness. That is your ego. Your subconscious mind is your super ego. And your beautiful identity is id. Intuition is your shadow self. Intuition is that deep, deep part of you that every Christian in stage 2 perspective tells you is evil. So we are taught the sins of the world are associated with our shadow self, our internal dark desires. They're not dark at all, actually. They're very human. And because of the societal conditioning and the perspective abuse, we cram those down into the 4th level of our subconscious mind because they're the very first things to die. This is the part of our brain that masturbates when we're children and we're told that's evil. This is the part of our brain that masturbates and our parents say, they'll go blind. Yeah, that shit. That's where it starts. So the very first thing we are taught and conditioned into, the very first perspective abuse we get is when we are about 2 years old, and it's mummy, our parents, versus our shadow selves. And they work very hard to make sure our shadow selves are crammed down into whatever hole they want to put us in because they think sex is dirty. Sex being dirty, sex being naughty, any condescending labels are not allowed here. Sex is healthy. Sex is good. Sex is beautiful. We do not shame sexual desire in my space. This is my space. I do not tolerate any sex shaming here. It's healthy, it's welcome, it's wanted. Welcome to the wonderful world of nonconformity. So, the shadow self, basically through being suppressed, fucks up our heads. We immediately receive something called behavioral defenses that condition us that this is naughty and horrible and bad. So we literally squash it down into our heads until we don't even remember it. And suddenly you're 16 and you've never masturbated in your life. And you're married and you have a serious guilt issue whenever you think about sex with your husband. If you think about premarital sex, you're labeled a slut or a whore. This is all because of that concept that sex is dirty. And what it ends up doing is completely destroying our shadow self. So there's people who rebel, who can't handle the suppression, who need an outlet. Those are my people. There are other people who are hopeless. That would be me. The reason why I was abused so horribly is because I was hopeless. There was no suppressing me, not even a little bit. I was 8 and okay, no. I have to tell you this time I was 14 years old and I had my boyfriend and I was at my Christian family reunion and I took the belt of my boyfriend at the time and I wrapped it around his throat and I carried him around by the collared leash that I made of his belt, calling him my little bitch. My Christian grandmother and my Christian uncle walked up to me and said, "Honey, you really shouldn't be doing that." And I replied, "What? He's my little bitch." So I was hopeless, which is why I was abused so drastically. I have no shame. That's it. I have no shame. Shame and embarrassment were tools that were tried to use on me, and I completely disempowered them. Really, that's what it is. When I was 8, people tried to use shame and embarrassment on me to control me, and I wouldn't have it. I'm just wired that way. One day I will figure out why, but I took their power. I completely took their power. They came along, they tried to shame me, they tried to embarrass me, and I just nothing. I was 12, I went skinny dipping in a river in town. It was private for the most part, but some boys from school saw it, and the next day I had literally every kid in my entire class hovered around laughing at my nudity. The whole goddamn class. And I do mean like 30 plus students. And I'm like, "What's so funny?" And my friend said to me while laughing, "You remember when we were skinny dipping or when we were swimming it the other day and you took all your clothes off?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, the boys from our class were there. Ha ha ha." And they were laughing about it. And I went, "Oh, grow the fuck up." Like I wouldn't have anything of it. So yeah, shame and embarrassment just do not it's I don't know what it is in my brain, but there's something about it that I took away their power, and we're going to talk about power, by not giving a shit. It's something that they tried to use as a manipulative. Oh, I know why now. I know why. I have a really awesome PTSD trigger that if somebody uses manipulation on me, my triggers go off like crazy. So I can't be manipulated. And it was already ingrained into me at that age. So when they tried to manipulate me through shame and guilt, my system wouldn't allow it. So that's the shadow self. Is really it's a condensed it's the deepest, darkest, most primal. It's our primary. It's our primal. It's very much our primal core. It is our primal sexuality, our primal desire. It is absolutely the thing that is connected to the universe. And it's very natural. Really, that's what it is. It's pagan. I'm going to call it pagan. The shadow self is a pagan. Yeah, that's it. It's a pagan. And it will always be a pagan. So it's very connected to nature. It's very connected to nature. Now, instead, the Christian church came along and referred to it as heathen. dirty, sinful, and actually it's just natural. It's a pagan. So our shadow self is just our natural selves. We are connected to the earth. And this is where you get into nudity, sexuality, exhibitionism, our raw, authentic, natural selves. This is where this is like, yeah, interesting. So when you're suppressed, we're under pressure. We are very much under pressure. So when we reach a certain point, we pop. Some people, depending upon the pressure, their personality, how pagan they pop more than others. Some people never pop. Some people get suppressed properly and stay suppressed. Other people never get suppressed. That's the hopeless, according to the church. And this is where BDSM is like a forbidden fruit that just dangles in front of them. It's absolutely when you suppress, on the other side of suppression is freedom. And that's the spectrum. All emotions are on a spectrum. And for this one, it is suppression and freedom. So when you have, it's really fascinating. I'm having such a fun time with this because it explains so much about me. Because I am obsessed with freedom. Like, I am this obsessed with freedom. It's on my arm. So, suppression and freedom are basically the spectrum. And you have some people who are basically very obedient, and some people who are rebels. And that's it. And when you get into the world of BDSM, BDSM is literally the forbidden fruit, that juicy, rebellious, it represents freedom. And when you are suppressed and suddenly you're given that as a concept, it depends really on your chemistry. It really depends on a lot of equations. How strict is it? How safe is it? How natural you are. So there's a cocktail, and there's a lot of variables that go into your cocktail. So depending upon where you are in this cocktail depends on whether or not you can come out and explore that in private, secret, or flamboyantly. I was flamboyant or not. Um, yeah. So the why we do it really is part of it's rebellion. Part of it is craving freedom. Another part of it is curiosity. And another part of it is really deep internal, I need to do this. And that's where I was. I was just who I was. It was just who I was. I was so tuned in to nature. I was an ethereal walker already by the time I was 4. So I was really tuned into my intuition. And my intuition was all about, do you want it? Yes, then do it. There was just no filter for me. There was just none. Like I said, I was hopeless. So it was just like, nope, got to go do. Nope, got to do. That looks fun. Let's go do that. People are watching. Great. I'll entertain them. Like it was just so natural, so tuned in. And so that's the first forbidden fruit. That's the first psychology of the forbidden fruit with BDSM. The second of all of this, and this is where things get to be real fun with the subconscious mind, the concept of impact or the concept of dominatrix. Now we're getting into the realm of control, power, authority. And if you've been abused by someone who controls, this is your way to safely, if done properly, explore that and examine the realm of control, power, and authority in a safely controlled environment. So you're in controlled without being in controlled. Now, the flip side of all of that is the nurturer. It allows us to explore forbidden realms. Now we're getting into kink. Now we're getting into lifestylists where you can explore all the things, all the taboo, all the things that you were told were wrong. This is really a huge quest for right and wrong. When you have severe structure, severe perspective abuse, and that's what it all comes down to. We are under a very suppressive perspective abusive society. And BDSM is a pressure cooker. It's a pressure valve. That is what BDSM is. For a lot of people, it's a pressure valve that allows you to release the pressure of all of the suppression you're under. Suppression has the word pressure in it for a reason. So BDSM is literally the pressure valve of your suppression. And depending upon how you were abused, how you were suppressed, is most likely going to influence what kind of BDSM you're into. So now we're going to look into BDSM. BDSM has a couple little bastardizations to the word. B is bondage. D could mean dominatrix or discipline. The first D is discipline. The next one is sadomasochist or submission. And the next one is masochist. So it's bondage, discipline, sadomasochist. Or if you look at just the DS, that is your dominatrix, dominance, and then the S for submission. Then you have kinks, which are separate. Kinks are not the same thing. There's also fetishes, not the same thing. Let me see if I can remember this. A kink. Yes, a kink is something you do that you enjoy, that you explore. But a fetish is something that has to be present in order for you to climax. So if you have a foot kink, you just like feet. But if you have a foot fetish, the foot has to be part of it in order for you to climax. That is the difference. Now, determining if you are healthy enough to do BDSM. There are definitely levels. There is beginner shit, and then there's intense shit, and then there's that shit. I do not participate in that shit. I have boundaries. Boundaries are a huge part of this. Boundaries are going to get a whole nother video all in themselves, which is another thing that I absolutely love about Zen BDSM is if you suck at setting boundaries, BDSM is a fantastic place to start. Oh my God, is it? And because it is a place, and this is what appealed to me with BDSM when I used it as for healing purposes finally. It allowed me to safely get into the practice of using boundaries. This is the other thing. BDSM was the only place where I felt safe sexually. The only times I was abused, the only times I was raped is in BDSM settings when I was forced to submit. Only time is when I was forced to submit in a BDSM setting. So my severe rapes from 1995 all the way to 2001 were both severe BDSMs, faux doms forcing me non-consensually to submit, which is why I don't submit. I do not allow anyone that anything. It's not allowed. So this allowed me to experience a lot in that realm that allowed me hands-on, that allowed me to safely explore. And it guaranteed that I was in charge. And for a rape victim, that was a big fucking deal. So that is pretty much how it defined me, is it allowed me to participate and explore in a safe, controlled environment. And if BDSM wasn't present, then sex was off the table. Because in my brain, it was absolutely fucking dangerous otherwise. And then when I branched out and I was ready to start exploring on okay, let's reenact traumas. Let's reenact this. There's a lot of different options available, which we will be going into all of the different options later on in this course. All of these things were absolutely phenomenal in opening doorways and situations that allowed me to explore this. I'm planning it all out, trying to figure out, did I cover everything? Have I covered everything in this particular thing that I wanted to cover? Because again, it is a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and just wrap it up here and cover what this course is really going to cover. Yes, I'm going to be covering everything. Like, assuming you're coming here, there's going to be two aspects to this. There's going to be, so you want to get into BDSM, here's how to do it safely. And then I'm going to have okay, I'm going to show you how to use this as a psychological tool for healing safely. And then my third, and this is the part that I really love, I'm going to be teaching you red flags to look for faux doms. So you can recognize safety, recognize danger, and we're going to get into the history of it, where it comes from, all of it. I'm going to be breaking it down for you. That way you have a full understanding of what it is. And it's absolutely extraordinary. I do have live New York City BDSM events. I have workshops there. So if you are in the New York City area, if you live or are planning to visit, if you look below on the links, I have available Join Anna's Elite, and those are all my live events. So go ahead and take a look there. I do have a workshop coming up in September for my BDSM workshop. And I do have an online BDSM workshop also coming up. So you can take a look at that also. But that is located under my events. Yeah, under my events. So take a look down below. All of my Anna's list, our Anna's Elite is there. You can get on the list. And I do a very vigorous, it's involved. And again, this is Zen BDSM. This is very much for healing purposes, with safety in mind. And if you're coming into this experienced in BDSM and you're wanting to just get in there and be ferocious, I don't tolerate that shit. No, I've heard way too many horror stories. I've experienced way too many horror stories. I have played psychologist to way too many horror stories and put girls back together because of those. So no, BDSM is fucking serious. It's fucking dangerous unless you know what you're dealing with, unless you know who you're dealing with. That being said, and this is really huge, and I want to cover this in almost every video, is SCC, SSC, or RAC. SSC was the first one, and this means safe, sane, consensual. Safe, meaning if you're going to do BDSM, you had better do it safely. Sane means you had better make sure the person is sane. And the next one is consensual. Now, this is huge for anybody. This is the way I am, period. BDSM or no. Safe, sane, consensual. At some point, I can't remember what decade, somebody critiqued it and went, okay, that's not thorough enough. And they're right, it's not. So they came up with RAC, which is risk-aware consensual kink. Now, personally, it doesn't cover sane and it doesn't cover safe. So for me, Zen BDSM, I want both. SSC, you better be safe. You will be sane because I'm going to make fucking sure you are sane enough to do this shit. And then there's risk aware, being aware of the damage, consensual kink. There are a few things that those are called hard, I'm going to get into soft boundaries, hard boundaries, and curious about. I'm going to get into all of that. And regarding all of that, there are things that I refuse to teach or participate in because I've looked into I've talked to doctors. I have sat down and had discussions with medical doctors. I have gone over, so have you ever seen this injury? And I've gotten an earful. So for instance, cock and ball torture, a CBT. It's really funny because cognitive behavioral therapy and cock and ball torture. That's in my brain. Just putting it out there. I've got them both in my brain. Cognitive behavioral therapy and cock and ball torture. I will not do cock and ball torture because a ruptured testicle will kill a man. So I don't do that shit. That is no. I don't want that on my conscience during a session. Fuck no. So that being said, there's a few other things that I refuse to participate in because unless you're a fucking medical doctor with the fucking medical degrees and all the shit there, You shouldn't be doing that. I have worked in a BDSM setting with medical doctors who were not mentally sane enough to pull BDSM off. I was not happy with their screening process. That being said, just because you're a medical doctor doesn't mean the ethics are there. I've met those guys. I've worked with those guys. That being said, we're going to go over all of it. And I'm going to be teaching you the right way to do this, the ethical way to do this, the safe way to do this, the psychologically should you way to do this. So thank you so much for joining me. If you love shit like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you love even more shit like this, subscribe to my newsletter. And if you want an organized, detailed design with purpose, take a look at my masterclasses. Thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.